Hey everybody, this is a video guiding you from noob to pro in about 15 minutes for Age of Mythology Retold. The game is set to launch in just a few short weeks, and it might even be out already by the time you're watching this video, but I want to make the best tips to make you most effective to increase your skill level as quickly as possible. And while this video is dedicated to brand new players, hopefully those who have played the legacy version in the past will get to enjoy this as well. We're going to be covering a lot of Age of Mythology here on the channel, so if you're interested, be sure to check out the other videos and the guide playlist as new content comes out. Alright, so always be training your villagers is the most important tip I would give to brand new players. AOM does support something called auto-queuing, so that means your villagers are always training, and I think that's enabled by default, so you don't need to be babysitting your town center to make sure that villagers are training. And on PC, this feature is actually there as well, whether you're playing on PC or console. Just be sure to always check your TC. You want to double check and make sure, because if you cancel training a villager, it will not resume auto-queuing. So just be mindful that you want to always be training villagers. That is the best and most effective way to increase your civilization's power through your economy in AOM Retold. You also want to double check and make sure you don't have any idle villagers. You can tell a villager to go do a task such as building a house or a blacksmith, a barracks, or even get a resource like a gold pile. And once that task is completed, unless there's something nearby that's similar to that task, for example, you build 2 or 3 buildings right next to each other, that villager will do those 2 or 3 buildings, but when it's done, it needs to know what you want it to do next. When a villager is idle, it's essentially just sitting there, literally doing nothing. Both console and PC for AOM Retold are going to support something called auto-tasking or villager priorities, whatever they are going to end up calling it. But it is something that you can pick to automatically assign your villagers to a task for resource gathering. They'll automatically build a resource building drop-off near that resource and go for whatever it is, wood, gold, build some farms. You just want to be mindful that that doesn't interrupt other tasks that you've set. So sometimes this is from like Age of Empires 4 on console with the priorities with your villagers. If I change it when a villager is building, sometimes that villager would abandon that task and then go do something else. And then I end up looking for something like, oh, where's this archery range? Come to find out that that villager abandoned their task, went to go, I don't know, chop wood or something. So just be sure to babysit your villagers. On PC, there's an idle villager button, and I've not played the console version yet at the time of recording this, but I have played the console version of AoE 2 and AoE 4. They're going to probably have some sort of auto button that takes you to an idle villager if a villager doesn't have anything to do. Next tip, make sure you're taking the relics. Now, relics act differently in Age of Mythology Retold compared to other games in the Age series, like Age of Empires 2 and Age of Empires 4. In those games, they acted as, especially in Age of Empires 4, you got gold, and you could also use it to convert enemy units. However, in Age of Mythology, they actually act as a permanent buff in certain things. And to my understanding, they're all randomized on like which relic does what. You'll find them, you can pick them up with any hero unit, not necessarily just a priest like that was the mechanic in AoE 4, but any hero unit can pick up a relic and return it to your temple. You can highlight with your cursor over the relic to tell you what a buff is. They can be a variety of things, like something like your line of sight is increased with your buildings, or villagers can carry resources, a little bit more resources than default. There's another one from the legacy version where like a pair of animals would spawn at your temple every like 30 seconds or so, and you could use them to fight in combat. It just kind of varies. Be sure, you're looking with your scout to see where the relics are, and if you have a hero unit in a temple and you want to use your hero unit to get the relics instead of doing something else like attacking, then definitely go for these relics and pick them up. You can always steal them from your opponent if you destroy their temple as well. Next tip, we want more production. More production equals a higher chance of winning. The reason why is if you only have 1 barracks or archery range, you can only build units 1 at a time. If you have a handful of each, you can train your units 5 at a time, given if you can afford it with your resources. Now, don't worry, you don't need to micromanage by clicking on each individual building and queuing up a unit. Go to click on 5 different barracks and then select infantry unit 5 different times, you can assign buildings to control groups, and I highly recommend you do so. That is something I do in every single game that I play. I assign all of my barracks to control group 2, my town center to 1, my archery ranges to 3, so on and so forth. That way, you can use those hotkeys to quickly select those buildings. And if let's say you have 5 barracks, you assign that to a control group. All you have to do is then train 5 infantry units, and it will spread them out 1 for each one, so you're building 5 at a time. And you can add buildings to your control groups. I recommend you do so as well. So if you build, go from 5 buildings, like say you have 5 barracks, as you go to 7, you want to make sure that all 7 are now in that control group instead of the previous 5. Next up, if you see large bodies of water, you want to make sure that you build a dock and fish on it as soon as possible. This essentially allows you to build 2 eco units at once, especially in the early game, because you're going to be training a villager from your town center and then a fisherman boat from your dock. And this is huge, especially in the early game, because what you can do is kind of delegate the resources of your fish, which gives you food, to your fishing boats. They do get it. I think it might be slower in AOM, whereas in like Age of Empires 4, it's faster than farms. I don't know. We'll find out when the game launches, but nonetheless, it is definitely worth it to be building 2 eco units at once. That's just better than villagers. So instead of villagers maybe gathering food, again, you're going to delegate that to your fishing ships on your dock. They'll get the food, and now those villagers that were going to get food, you can tell them to go get a different resource like gold or wood, or if you're Greek, you could tell them to go worship at the temple to get some favor for leader power or something. You want to make sure that you're prioritizing the resources that are available to you. So if you see fish on the water, again, build a dock. You want to send some villagers at wood to afford these fishing ships, and then go get that fish. Kind of piggybacking off of that last point, you want to prioritize the resources that you need for whatever civilization you're playing for. And I know that's kind of a generalized statement, but for example, Greeks, they rely more on food and gold than wood early on in the game. Other civs may not be the case. So make sure you're getting the best output from your villagers by strategizing how you want to age up. Like, do you want to age up faster? Not build as many military units early on so you can get maybe more upgrades or a different variety of units in your army comp? Or the opposite, do you want to build more military units early on in the game for an early push to your opponent? Or do you want to control the map based on what your opponent's doing? So another example, if you see your opponent is really aggressive, you may want to hold off on building a second town center. Instead, you probably want to do something like maybe walls to slow them down, or build your own military units to counter what their early push could be. You want to make sure, again, you're prioritizing what works best given the scenario on the map. And I know that might sound like common sense, but too many times in games, I'll see players just kind of avoid what the dynamics are happening on the map and instead go for what their usual build order is, and it may or may not work out for them given on what everyone else in the game is doing. Especially in teams, be sure if you're partied up with your friends or people that you're doing a looking for group with, or you're in voice chat, whatever, make sure you're communicating. Like, hey, I'm seeing this guy on this other team is really aggressive. Maybe we shouldn't age up very quickly. Maybe we want to stop this push. Whatever. You want to find, again, some sort of strategy that works best for your civilization. And sometimes that only comes down to practice makes perfect. But again, just be mindful of that. Next up, trade. You get free gold while you're trading, and most units in Age of Mythology require gold. You get gold by trading from a market to an allied town center. That's a little bit different than in Age of Empires 4, where you would trade from market to market. So if you're coming from AoE 4, again, this is a little bit of a difference for you, but nonetheless, the mechanic more or less works the same. You're just trading to a different location. The longer the distance between the market and the town center you're trading to, the more gold you're going to get. Of course, there's a little bit more of an increased risk with that because your traders are going to be exposed longer while they're carrying the gold on the return trip. However, you can kind of fix that by, I've seen people even build, we've done it as well. You build walls on the path of your traders. So like they can't get hit by melee units, or whatever, or they're behind a row of keeps or towers or something. I mean, this is all late game stuff, but you want to make sure that you do eventually get into trading as the game progresses, because the gold piles that are available on the map, of course, will diminish and, go away as everyone is mining them. So you're going to need to transition into building traders as you progress in the game. Sometimes you'll see some players do a gamble and do it as soon as possible. It is a big expense to get these traders going, and you got to wait a while for these returns to start coming in. So it's a risk-reward play there. But again, just be mindful that you do want to trade as the game progresses to an allied town center. Next up, you want to be building your town centers on settlement sites. This increases your max population, and it allows you to build more villagers quickly. It's kind of like if you build a second town center, you're literally doubling the output of your villagers. And again, having more villagers makes your economy stronger. You're getting more resources faster. That in turn allows you to do whatever it is you want to do. That could be more upgrades for your units, going to the next age, getting more units in general. Whatever the case is, you want to make sure that you eventually start building more town centers on these settlement sites. Just because, again, not only outside of building more villagers, but you get an increase in your max population. Speaking of kind of rolling from more economy units, just in general, in Age of Mythology, and any Age of Empires game, you could take this tip as well. More units are generally better than less units. You might say, oh, that's common sense. The point is like if you have more units, but they don't have as many upgrades as your opponent, let's say your opponent has less units, but more upgrades, chances are you might actually still end up winning that engagement. Halo Wars is the exact same way. You can have more units but weaker upgrades compared to your opponent who has less units but more upgrades. You're still going to end up usually winning that engagement. And the same is true with Age of Mythology and Age of Empires. So if you're considering, hey, should I build more units or should I upgrade my units? I'm not saying you should abandon or delay getting upgrades until it's too late, or you're going to end up losing your engagements because you don't have these upgrades. What I'm saying is just consider the opportunity cost. The resources you're going to be putting into these upgrades are resources that you're not going to be using to producing either more production buildings or more units in general. Just keep that in mind as you're playing through your matches. Next, make sure you're scouting your opponent. If you get one of these at the start of the game, and I think you almost always do, depending on the game mode that you pick, you're going to use it to gather wildlife. They don't follow your scout like they do in Age of Empires 4, so you have to manually move them back to your town center. But more importantly, you get to see what your opponent's doing. Are they going for resources way outside their base? Are they trying to do what's called a proxy, where they're building production buildings kind of closer to your base than is to their base so their units can get to you faster? All of these things can help you change the dynamic of how you're playing, and scouting your opponent is a very important part in making sure you are building your units and your economy to the best it can to beat your opponent. Some final smaller tips as we wrap up the video. Age of Mythology looks to support crossplay, and it's going to launch at the same time as console and PC. That's a first for an Age game. Age of Empires 2, of course, launched in the late 90s, early 2000s. Didn't hit the Xbox Series consoles until a couple of years ago. There was a big time gap there. Age of Empires 4 launched on PC in 2021, came to Xbox sometime last year. This time with AOM, I guess technically Age of Mythology has been on PC since like 2004, 2005, but the point is this remake is coming to PC and Xbox at the same time. I'm really excited to play this on Xbox, I'll be honest with you. I think that'll be really fun. If you want to get a general understanding and practice of the gameplay, if you've never played AOM before, you can still buy the Legacy version on sale on Steam for pretty cheap. Lastly, take your time, learn the different civs, whether that's campaign or skirmish. Each civilization is vastly different from the other, and much more compared to AoE 2 and AoE 4. Each one has their strengths and differences. And again, take the time to find the one you like, the best build order that works for you, and how to counter other civs with it. Again, I know that's common sense, but just invest in the game. It might be frustrating at first, but you're going to learn things with each match. Like, what's a key takeaway? It can take why I won this match or why I lost it. It gives you a ton of stats at the end of the game that can be helpful for improving your play, and you will end up getting better as time goes on. And it's a great game. I absolutely love Age of Mythology. Even the Legacy version is a blast to play. So I hope you give it a shot when it launches later this year. It'll be on the Game Pass. I'm going to pick it up on Xbox, and we're going to be covering Age of Mythology Retold with more guides. We're going to be playing it on live streams, covering all of the civs, so on and so forth. That's all going to be here on the channel, and we do have other tutorials for the other Age games, Age of Empires 2 and 4, whether you're playing on PC or console. Okay, that's going to do it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, everybody, and I'll see you, James.